Ethan Vera had always dreamed of seeing the stars. Since childhood, he had stared at the night sky and imagined worlds beyond Earth. Now, after years of study and training, he finally had the chance to join the Intergalactic Cultural Exchange Program. For him, it was more than just a program. It was a doorway to adventure, to understanding new civilizations, and to proving that humans could stand as equals among the countless alien species scattered across the galaxy. When the shuttle dropped him at the massive orbital academy station, he felt as if his life had finally begun. The station floated near a calm blue planet, its rings of light catching the sun and scattering reflections across the academy's silver hull. Thousands of students from hundreds of species roamed the wide halls. Some looked almost human, while others were covered in scales, fur, or shimmering exoskeletons. The academy was alive with voices, laughter, and the buzzing sound of languages that human translators barely managed to interpret. Ethan carried his small bag of belongings and his datapad. He had been told that his roommate was from another species, but the file gave little information. Just a name, Kalira of the Nerothi. No description, no image. The Nerothi were not a species he knew much about, but the word alone sparked curiosity. He reached the living quarters, his heart beating with both excitement and nervousness. The corridor stretched long, lined with doors. Each door carried glowing alien scripts along with the assigned student numbers. He finally found his unit, Dorm 7 Delta, Room 12. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a simple two-person room. 2 beds, 2 desks, and 1 large bathing chamber built into the side wall. Everything gleamed with cleanliness the way new living spaces always did. Ethan stepped inside, placed his bag on his bed, and looked around. The other bed was already occupied. A folded blanket lay neatly across it, and on the desk sat an unusual crystal sphere that pulsed faintly with light. Beside it, there was a small device that looked like a breathing mask connected to a container of liquid. Whoever Kalira was, she was clearly already here. Ethan sat on his bed and waited, his thoughts restless. What kind of person was his roommate? Would they be friendly? Would they even speak standard? The station had translators, but sometimes they struggled with emotions, and emotions were where misunderstandings happened. He didn't wait long. The door slid open again and a tall figure entered. Kalira stepped inside. She wore a long, flowing uniform robe provided by the academy. The robe covered her completely, its material shifting slightly like thin water silk. Her face was partly veiled with a translucent mask, though her eyes were visible. They were unlike any eyes Ethan had seen before, large, luminous, with gentle blue-green light swirling within them, as if ocean tides had been captured in crystal orbs. For a moment, Ethan froze, not sure what to say. Kalira noticed him, paused, and inclined her head politely. "You are Ethan Vera?" Her voice was soft, carrying a faint echo like someone speaking from underwater. "Yes," Ethan said, standing quickly. "And you must be Kalira, my new roommate." She nodded once, moving gracefully across the room. She placed her belongings near her bed, then adjusted the breathing device on the desk. She wore gloves, though Ethan noticed her fingers looked longer and more delicate than human ones. Every movement she made was careful, almost too careful, as if she was always afraid of making a mistake. There was silence for a while. Ethan thought he should say something, anything to break the tension. "It's good to meet you," he said, offering a friendly smile. "I hope we can get along." Kalira tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes studying him. Then after a pause, she answered, "Yes, I hope so too." That was all. She lowered her gaze and busied herself with arranging her belongings. Ethan sat back down, unsure of what to do next. The first few days were strange. Ethan tried to make conversation, but Kalira was reserved. She answered questions politely, but never gave more than a sentence or two. She attended classes with him, though often she sat at the back, avoiding crowds. In the cafeteria, she ate alone, and her meals always looked like clear, jelly-like cubes rather than solid food. Ethan noticed how other students looked at her. Some stared openly, whispering among themselves. Others avoided her entirely. It wasn't hostility, not yet, but there was something in the air, distrust, maybe even fear. Ethan wondered why. One evening, as they both studied at their desks, Ethan finally spoke up. "Kalira," he said carefully, "can I ask you something?" She looked up, her luminous eyes faintly glowing in the dim light. "Yes? Why do you always wear that robe and mask? I mean, sorry if that sounds rude." I'm just curious, she went silent. For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she lowered her gaze. It is better this way, she said softly. It makes others more comfortable. Ethan didn't understand, but he didn't push further. He could tell the subject made her uncomfortable. Still, the question lingered in his mind. Days passed. Slowly, Ethan and Kalira began to settle into a routine. He learned that she was an excellent student, quiet but very intelligent. She seemed to know far more about energy fields and pressure systems than most other students. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes would shine brighter, and faint patterns of light flickered under the edges of her robe. One night, Ethan worked late on his data pad. The water recycler in their room had begun to malfunction, dripping continuously with an annoying sound. He decided to fix it before trying to sleep. The recycler unit was located inside the bathing chamber. Kalira had already gone inside earlier, carrying her usual robe. Ethan thought she was just preparing for rest. He didn't hear the sound of the shower, only the dripping of the recycler. Assuming she was done, he picked up his toolkit and walked toward the bathing chamber. The door slid open. Inside, steam curled in the air, filling the room with a soft glow. Ethan froze instantly. Kalira was there, but she was not wearing her robe, and what he saw was nothing like what he expected. Her body was not solid like a human's. It shimmered with translucent light, her form shifting slightly as if made of flowing crystal water. Gentle patterns of bioluminescence moved across her skin, glowing softly like stars in liquid motion. Her hair, or what looked like hair, floated lightly as though suspended in invisible water currents. For a brief second, Ethan could only stare, caught between awe and shock. Kalira gasped when she saw him. Her glowing form flickered and she quickly pulled the robe around herself, turning away. "You..." Her voice trembled, carrying both fear and anger. "You were not supposed to leave." Ethan's face burned red with embarrassment. He dropped his toolkit and stumbled backward. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in here. I was just trying to fix the recycler. I'm so sorry." The door hissed shut between them. Back in the room, Ethan pressed his hands to his face, his heart pounding wildly. He had not meant to intrude, but the image of Kalira's true form burned brightly in his mind. It was not frightening, not ugly, it was breathtaking. Yet he could also feel her fear, her shame at being seen. He sat on his bed for a long time, unsure of what to do. That night, the silence in the room was heavy. Kalira did not speak a word. She lay on her bed, the faint glow of her eyes hidden behind the robe. Ethan wanted to apologize again, but he feared he might only make things worse. Still, one thought refused to leave his mind. Her body was not what he expected. It was something far more mysterious and far more beautiful than he ever imagined. And perhaps that accidental glimpse would be the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Ethan woke up to silence. Usually, Kalira moved around quietly at dawn, preparing her study materials and checking her breathing device. But this time she was not at her desk. Her bed was empty, her robe neatly folded, her crystal sphere gone. Ethan sat up, rubbing his eyes. The memory of last night returned instantly. The glowing patterns, the translucent body, the liquid-like form, it all replayed in his mind. He had not meant to see her like that. It had been a mistake, a complete accident. Yet no matter how much he told himself it wasn't his fault, he knew Kalira must feel exposed, maybe even betrayed. He stood and walked to the desk, staring at the empty space where her belongings had been. "Did she leave?" he whispered. Panic stirred in his chest. He had only just begun to know her. Despite her quietness, he had started to see a glimpse of someone kind, someone carrying secrets. If she asked to be moved to another dorm, it would be his fault. Ethan hurried out of the room, heading to the academy's main hall. Students from dozens of species walked in every direction. He scanned the crowd, searching for her glowing eyes, her flowing robe. Hours passed with no sign. Finally, in the quiet of the library wing, he spotted her. She was seated in a corner, her robe drawn tightly around her body. The breathing mask was placed carefully on the table, and her hands rested folded on her lap. Her head was lowered as if she wanted to vanish into the shadows. Ethan approached slowly, his steps hesitant. "Kalira," he said softly. She looked up sharply. Her glowing eyes narrowed and she turned away. You should not speak to me. Ethan's heart sank. Please. I didn't mean to. What happened yesterday, it was an accident. I swear. Kalira's fingers tightened around the edge of her robe. You saw what you were never supposed to see. My kind hides our true form for a reason. Others cannot accept it. Ethan sat across from her, keeping his voice low and gentle. I didn't think it was wrong. I mean, yes, it surprised me, but it wasn't ugly or frightening. It was... He hesitated, searching for words. Beautiful. Her eyes widened slightly, the glow inside them flickering as if stirred by a current. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. No one says that, she whispered. Not even my own people. They call it unstable, dangerous. Ethan shook his head firmly. Then they're wrong. What I saw, it wasn't dangerous. It was you, and I think you don't need to hide. Kalira's gaze softened, though doubt still lingered. You are human. Your kind has only just begun to explore beyond your world. You do not understand how cruel the galaxy can be. Maybe I don't, Ethan admitted. But I do know one thing. Everyone deserves to be seen as they are. Her hands trembled slightly and she looked away, silent again. But Ethan noticed something different. Her body language was no longer pushing him away. She wasn't ready to trust fully, but a seed had been planted. The following days were awkward, but slowly things began to shift. Kalira no longer avoided him completely. She answered his questions with more detail. She sat beside him in lectures, though still keeping her robe tightly around her. Ethan made sure never to mention what he had seen unless she brought it up. One evening, as they studied together, Kalira suddenly spoke. Do you know why the Nerothi hide themselves? Ethan looked up from his datapad. No, will you tell me? She hesitated, then continued, her voice soft, carrying the same echo of waves. Our bodies are not fixed. We are made of fluid structures that can shift under pressure. In our oceans, it is natural. But when other species saw us, they said we were unstable, unnatural. Some called us formless monsters. The more they judged us, the more we learned to cover ourselves. It is easier to survive behind masks than to live with constant fear. Ethan listened carefully. Every word carried centuries of pain, not just her own, but of her entire people. That's unfair, he said quietly. They judged you before trying to understand. Kalira gave a sad smile, faint but real. That is the galaxy's way. Difference is feared. Ethan leaned closer, his voice steady. Then let me be different. I don't fear you. Her eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and she quickly looked away. You speak boldly, human. But words are simple. Actions are harder. A week later, Ethan had the chance to prove himself. In the cafeteria, Kalira carried her tray of clear nutrient cubes. A group of alien students at the far table whispered and laughed as she passed. One of them, a broad-shouldered reptilian, called out, Hey, water ghost! Careful not to spill yourself on the floor. The group burst into laughter. Kalira froze, her robe tightening around her body. Her glowing eyes dimmed. She lowered her head, clearly wanting to disappear. Ethan's anger flared. Without thinking, he stood and walked to the group. That's enough, he said firmly. You don't even know her. You have no right to talk like that, the reptilian sneered. And what are you, human? Her keeper? You think her kind belongs here? They'll melt under real pressure. She belongs here as much as anyone else, Ethan shot back. Maybe more, because at least she doesn't waste time insulting others. The group muttered, some amused, some annoyed. But Ethan stood tall, refusing to back down. Finally, the reptilian scoffed and waved him away. Fine, hide behind your little ghost. But don't say we didn't warn you. Ethan returned to Kalira's side. She looked at him with wide eyes, glowing softly. Why did you do that? She whispered. Because you didn't deserve it, Ethan said simply. Her gaze lingered on him for a long time, as if weighing his soul. Then slowly she nodded. Perhaps you are not like the others. That night, back in their room, Kalira sat at her desk while Ethan fixed the recycler again. The machine hummed, then finally stilled, no longer dripping. You said actions are harder than words, Ethan said, standing. Did my actions speak enough today? Kalira turned, her glowing eyes meeting his. For the first time, she removed her veil, revealing her full face. Her features were smooth, delicate, yet ever-shifting as if shaped by flowing currents. She was both alien and beautiful, unlike anything Ethan had seen. Yes, she whispered. They did. Ethan smiled, not wanting to break the fragile moment. Then maybe, one day you'll trust me enough to show me who you really are. Not by accident this time, only if you choose. Kalira studied him for a long time, then slowly placed her hand over her chest. The faint light beneath her robe pulsed once like the heartbeat of an ocean. Perhaps, she said softly. One day. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the glowing patterns, the shifting form, the way she looked at him with both fear and hope. Her body had not been what he expected. But now he understood. It was not her body that mattered most. It was her courage to live in a galaxy that refused to accept her. And maybe, just maybe, he had found his purpose here, not just to study, not just to learn, but to stand by someone who needed a friend, no matter how different she was. The Academy station orbited in quiet beauty above the blue planet below, but inside its walls life was never quiet. Students hurried through the halls, voices blending into a mix of languages. Yet within room 12 of Dorm 7 Delta, there was a strange peace. Ethan and Kalira had begun to find balance after the accident. Their words to each other had grown longer, their silences less heavy. Kalira no longer turned away when Ethan spoke. She listened. Sometimes she even asked him questions about Earth, questions filled with quiet curiosity. One evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic night, Ethan returned from the library carrying his datapad. Kalira sat at her desk, the crystal sphere glowing faintly in her hands. Her luminous eyes followed the patterns within it. Ethan set his pad down and leaned against his bed. You always stare at that sphere. Is it important to you? Kalira hesitated, her long fingers curling gently around the sphere. Yes, it is. A memory anchor. Nerothi carry them when we travel far from our oceans. They hold the songs of our home. Songs? Ethan asked, intrigued. She nodded slowly. Our people do not write history the way humans do. We do not carve stone or record words on paper. We sing. The oceans carry our songs across great distances. The water remembers. The anchor holds part of that memory. Ethan blinked in wonder. So that sphere, it's like your history book? Her glowing eyes softened. It is more than history. It is home. He thought about how humans carried photos of family or recordings of voices. For Kalira, this glowing sphere was the same, maybe even more powerful. Would you ever let me hear it? He asked carefully. Kalira froze. Her body stiffened and the faint light under her robe dimmed. No, she whispered quickly. It is not for outsiders. Ethan lifted his hands in surrender. All right, I understand. I won't ask again. She turned her gaze back to the sphere, but her eyes flickered with conflict as though she wanted to believe him yet feared he would press her further. Ethan did not. He kept his promise. The next day, Ethan learned something new about Kalira in class. Their energy systems professor assigned a group project. Students were to design a portable shield generator that could withstand extreme pressure. Ethan and Kalira were paired together, much to his relief. When they began planning, Kalira surprised him with her knowledge. She understood pressure equations in ways even the professor struggled to explain. While Ethan scribbled calculations, she adjusted them with graceful ease, her glowing eyes brightening as if the numbers brought her comfort. You're amazing at this, Ethan said, impressed. Kalira tilted her head, confused. It is natural. In the deep oceans of my world, we live with pressure strong enough to crush metal. My body knows it even when my mind is silent. Ethan realized then her people didn't just study pressure, they lived it. What frightened most species was her daily reality. As they worked, Kalira seemed to relax more than usual. Her voice grew smoother, and sometimes her hands glowed faintly when she sketched diagrams on the holopad. Ethan pretended not to notice, letting her reveal herself at her own pace. Later that week, as they walked back to their dorm, Ethan finally asked the question he had been holding inside. Kalira, why do other students treat you like you don't belong? I mean, I've noticed the looks, the whispers. Her steps slowed. She held her robe tighter. Because they fear what they do not understand. They say the Nerothi are formless, untrustworthy. Some believe we can slip through walls, invade minds, or drown others with a single touch. Lies travel faster than truth. Ethan frowned. That's ridiculous. None of that is true, right? Kalira stopped walking. She turned to face him, her luminous eyes unreadable. It is not true, but sometimes I wish it were. Then perhaps the fear would have reason. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort her, but he also felt the weight of her words. She lived her whole life under suspicion, forced to hide. He finally said, "You don't need to prove yourself to them. You're already more than they'll ever understand." For a moment, Kalira's eyes shimmered with something like gratitude. Then she looked away, continuing down the hall. That night, Ethan awoke to a soft sound singing. He sat up slowly, careful not to startle her. Across the room, Kalira sat by the window, the crystal sphere in her lap. Her robe had slipped slightly, revealing glowing streams of light along her arms. She sang softly, words in a language he didn't know, each note rising and falling like waves. The song filled the room, gentle yet powerful, carrying sorrow and beauty in equal measure. Ethan felt his chest tighten, his eyes stinging though he didn't know why. When she finished, silence fell again. "Kalira," Ethan whispered. "That was incredible." She stiffened, realizing he had been awake. "You were not meant to hear that." "I'm glad I did," he said honestly. It felt alive, like the ocean itself was here. Her glowing eyes turned toward him. For once she didn't scold or hide. She simply studied him, searching for mockery but finding none. Slowly she placed the crystal sphere back on her desk. "You heard a Nerothi song," she said softly. "Few outsiders ever do. You should not speak of it." "I won't," Ethan promised. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she turned back to the window, but something had changed between them. The wall she kept so carefully around herself had cracked, if only a little. The following days brought challenges. Rumors began to spread among the students. Someone had seen strange lights flickering in their dorm window at night. Whispers followed Kalira through the halls, claims that she was dangerous, unnatural. Ethan stayed close to her, ignoring the stares. But he could feel the pressure building. Sooner or later, someone would confront her. One afternoon, as they worked on their shield generator in the lab, Ethan asked, "If it gets worse, what will you do?" Kalira's hands paused over the circuit board. "What I always do," she said quietly. "Hide, survive." Ethan shook his head. "No, you shouldn't have to hide anymore." Her luminous eyes lifted to his. "What else is there?" He leaned forward, his voice steady. "They're standing tall. They're showing them who you really are. And I'll be right there with you." Kalira stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, the faintest smile touched her lips. "You speak as though courage is simple." "Maybe it isn't," Ethan admitted. "But it's easier when you don't stand alone." That night, Kalira surprised him. "Ethan," she said softly as they prepared for sleep. "You asked before why I always hide. Do you still wish to know the truth?" Ethan sat up, nodding. "Yes, but only if you're ready." She hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering like shifting tides. Then, with deliberate slowness, she loosened her robe. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, revealing the luminous patterns beneath. Her body shimmered like living crystal water, fluid yet shaped, glowing softly in the dark. Ethan's breath caught. It was the same beauty he had glimpsed by accident, but now she chose to show him. "This is who I am," Kalira whispered. "Not stable, not solid, always shifting. This is the truth of the Nerothi." Ethan looked at her not with fear but with awe. "It's amazing," he said honestly. "You're amazing." Her glowing form rippled slightly as if moved by invisible waves. "And you are strange, human, strange, but kind." For the first time since he met her, Kalira did not hide. She let him see her, fully and without shame. As Ethan lay awake later that night, he thought about the trust she had given him. He knew it wasn't easy for her. She had spent her life hiding, fearing judgment. Yet now she had chosen to reveal herself, to him. The secret beneath the surface was no longer hidden, and Ethan realized that from this moment forward, he had a responsibility. Not just to protect her secret, but to protect her heart. Because what he saw was not what he expected. It was something far greater. Life at the Academy station grew heavier for Ethan and Kalira. For a time, things between them had been calm. After she revealed her true form, even if only for a brief moment, Ethan felt closer to her than ever before. He kept her secret, and she slowly trusted him more. But outside their dorm, whispers had grown louder. Students spoke in low voices when Kalira passed through the halls. Some called her unstable. Others warned newcomers not to get too close. The rumors were like shadows. They spread quickly and darkened everything they touched. Ethan hated it. He wanted to shout at them, to make them see what he saw. But Kalira always shook her head. "Do not waste your voice," she whispered one morning. "The ocean does not argue with the waves. It waits and it endures." "But you shouldn't have to endure this," Ethan said, frustrated. Kalira gave him a quiet look, her glowing eyes calm, but tired. "I have endured it all my life. What is one more season of whispers?" Ethan clenched his fists, but stayed silent. Still, deep inside, he knew this could not last forever. The breaking point came one afternoon. Ethan and Kalira had just left a lecture hall, their datapads full of notes about starship energy systems. They were heading down the long corridor when a group of students stepped into their path. At the front stood the reptilian student Ethan had argued with in the cafeteria, the one who had mocked Kalira. His scales gleamed dark green under the artificial lights, and his heavy tail thumped against the floor. Behind him were two others, both larger than Ethan and clearly eager for trouble. Well, the reptilian sneered. "If it isn't the human and his little water ghost." Ethan's jaw tightened. He moved slightly in front of Kalira, though she stood tall at his side. "What do you want?" "What do we want?" The reptilian laughed, a rough, hissing sound. "We want the truth. Strange lights in your dorm, whispers of singing, and you, human, always defending her. Tell us, what is she really hiding?" Kalira said nothing. Her hands folded within her robe, her eyes dimmed. Ethan could feel her tension like a storm waiting to break. "She doesn't have to tell you anything," Ethan said firmly. "Leave her alone." But the reptilian stepped closer, towering over him. "Or what, you'll fight us? Defend your little ghost until the academy sees you as one of them too?" The two students behind him laughed cruelly. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't move back. "I'll defend her because she deserves respect. Something you clearly don't understand." The reptilian narrowed his eyes, his tail lashing. "You don't even know what she is, human. She could drown you in your sleep. She could slip through the walls and flood the whole dorm. That's what the Nerothi are, dangerous, unstable." "That's a lie," Ethan snapped. "Prove it then," the reptilian hissed. His gaze shifted to Kalira. "Show us your true form, water ghost, or admit you don't belong here." Kalira's body trembled faintly beneath her robe. Ethan could feel her fear, but also her shame. The very thing she had trusted him with, they now demanded she reveal to everyone like some kind of test. "No," Ethan said sharply. "She doesn't owe you anything," the reptilian growled, stepping even closer. "Then you admit it." "She's hiding because she's a threat." Ethan stood his ground. "She's hiding because of people like you." For a moment, the corridor was tense, filled with stares from other students who had gathered at a distance to watch. The air felt heavy, as if the station itself held its breath. Kalira whispered, almost too softly for Ethan to hear. "Ethan, stop, please." But Ethan shook his head. "No, you've been silent too long. If they want the truth, I'll give it to them." He turned to face the crowd. His voice rose, steady and strong. "She's not dangerous. She's not unstable. She's Kalira of the Nerothi, and she has more strength and more courage than any of you." The crowd murmured, uncertain. The reptilian snarled. "Big words from a small human." "She's my friend," Ethan said firmly. "And if you want to call her a monster, then you'll have to call me one too, because I stand with her." For a moment, silence fell. Kalira's glowing eyes widened. She looked at Ethan with something between shock and wonder. No one had ever spoken for her like this. Not in front of others. "Not so openly," the reptilian hissed, frustrated, but he could see the eyes of the watching students. Some were whispering, but others looked thoughtful, even uncertain. If he pushed further, he risked turning the crowd against him. With a final glare, he spat on the floor. "This isn't over, human ghost. The galaxy will show you the truth." He turned and stormed away, his companions following. The crowd slowly dispersed, some muttering, others silent. Ethan finally turned back to Kalira. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She stared at him, her eyes glowing faintly. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" "Because you don't deserve to be treated like this," Ethan said simply. "You've hidden long enough. They needed to hear the truth." Kalira shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. "You risked yourself. For me." "I told you," Ethan said with a small smile. "You don't have to stand alone anymore." For a moment, Kalira said nothing. Then with visible effort, she lifted her hands and pulled back her veil, just slightly, enough for Ethan to see her glowing features. The corridor was empty now, but the act itself was a gift. "A sign of trust. You are not like the others," she whispered. "Perhaps I was wrong to hide so much." Ethan's chest warmed at her words. He nodded gently. You can be yourself, Kalira. At least with me. She lowered her veil again, but her eyes glowed brighter than before. That night in their dorm, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Kalira sat at her desk, the crystal sphere glowing faintly as she touched it. Ethan sat on his bed watching her quietly. They will come again, Kalira said softly. The whispers will not end. Then let them come, Ethan said firmly. We'll face them together. She looked at him for a long moment. Then for the first time she smiled. It was faint, fragile but real. Together, she repeated. Ethan leaned back, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. He knew the conflict was far from over. The academy was a place of learning, but it was also a place of judgment. Kalira's struggle would not vanish overnight. But now she wasn't facing it alone, and that made all the difference. The station's artificial sun rose slowly, filling the academy halls with a golden glow. Life went on as usual. Lectures, training drills, study groups, and late-night discussions. But for Ethan and Kalira, everything had changed. The confrontation in the hall had shaken them both, yet it had also created something stronger, a bond others could not easily break. Ethan had defended her publicly, and Kalira had shown him a smile she had never given to anyone else. Still, the days that followed were far from peaceful. Rumors continued, whispers following Kalira like shadows. Some students avoided her. Others stared at Ethan with open curiosity. To many, their friendship was a mystery. Why would a human stand so firmly with a Nerothi? But Ethan didn't care, and Kalira, though cautious, began to change. For the first time since she had arrived at the academy, she began walking with her head higher. She no longer hid entirely beneath her robe. The veil still covered much of her face, but now when she passed others, her glowing eyes shone more clearly. Ethan noticed it. One evening, as they studied together in their dorm, he said, "You seem different lately, braver." Kalira tilted her head, her glowing hair faintly visible where it slipped from her hood. Perhaps I simply borrowed your courage for a time." Ethan smiled. "If that's all it takes, then borrow as much as you want." Kalira gave him a soft look but said nothing more. Yet the silence between them was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with quiet trust. The true test came when the academy announced a joint survival exercise. Students from different species would be grouped into teams and sent to the outer training grounds of the station, a massive dome filled with artificial terrain, rivers, and simulated dangers. It was meant to test teamwork, resourcefulness, and endurance. Ethan and Kalira were, of course, placed together, but so were the reptilian student and his followers. The moment Ethan saw the list, he knew trouble was ahead. "Perhaps this is the time," Kalira said quietly, looking at the roster. "The time when we prove that we belong." "Or the time they try to prove the opposite," Ethan muttered. Kalira met his eyes calmly. "Then we must not let them." The survival dome was vast, stretching miles under a transparent shell that showed the stars beyond. Artificial rivers ran through rocky cliffs. Strange plants glowed in patches of shadow. Creatures, holographic but dangerously realistic, moved between the trees. Their team of 6 was dropped at the edge of the dome, each carrying a pack of supplies. The goal was simple: reach the central beacon within 3 days, surviving whatever challenges the dome produced. Almost immediately, conflict erupted. The reptilian leaders sneered at Kalira. "Keep your ghost on a leash, human. I won't have her drowning us in our sleep." "She won't," Ethan shot back. "She's more trustworthy than you'll ever be." Kalira said nothing, only tightening her pack straps. She knew words would not change minds, only actions would. The first night tested them. The dome simulated a sudden storm. Winds howled, rain fell in torrents, and the ground grew slick. Their small shelter nearly collapsed under the force. Ethan fought to hold the structure up, but the storm was too strong. Then Kalira stepped forward. Her body glowed faintly as she lifted her hands. The rain around them seemed to shift, flowing over the shelter instead of through it. The winds bent slightly, giving them just enough protection to last the night. When it ended, the reptilian stared at her with suspicion but also grudging awe. "You bent the storm," he muttered. Kalira lowered her hands, exhausted but steady. "I guided it. Nothing more." Ethan knelt beside her, concern in his voice. "You didn't have to." I did, Kalira whispered. We survived together or not at all. For the first time, Ethan noticed something in the reptilian's eyes, not just hatred but doubt. The next day, danger came in the form of simulated beasts, creatures with metallic claws and glowing eyes. They ambushed the group near a ravine. The reptilian fought fiercely, his claws slashing. Ethan used his training stick to drive them back. But when one of the creatures lunged at a smaller student, Kalira moved without hesitation. Her body shifted, her form glowing brighter as liquid-like patterns rippled across her skin. She caught the beast in a shimmering wave of energy, holding it just long enough for the reptilian to strike. When the fight was over, the group stood in silence, breathing hard. You saved him, one of the reptilian's followers said slowly, looking at Kalira. Kalira only nodded. No one should be left behind. For the first time, no one laughed. No one mocked. By the third day, the team had begun to change. The reptilian still watched her with suspicion, but he no longer spoke with the same cruel tone. His followers looked at her with something close to respect, and Ethan saw it. Kalira standing taller, her glow brighter, her fear fading. She was no longer just enduring. She was proving herself. When they finally reached the central beacon, all 6 stood together. The instructors marked their success, noting their cooperation. But Ethan knew the true victory was Kalira's. For the first time, others had seen her not as a ghost or a monster, but as a teammate. Back in their dorm that night, Ethan turned to her. You did it. You showed them who you are. Kalira looked at him quietly. No, we did it. You stood beside me when I could not stand alone. Ethan shook his head. But it was your strength that carried us through. Kalira was silent for a long time. Then softly she said, Perhaps this was what I did not expect. What do you mean? Ethan asked. Her glowing eyes met his. I did not expect trust. I did not expect to be seen, Ethan smiled. And I didn't expect my roommate to become the bravest person I know. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the quiet hum of the station around them. Then Kalira whispered, Thank you, Ethan, for everything. Ethan leaned back, feeling warmth in his chest. Always, Kalira, always. Days passed. The whispers in the halls grew quieter. Some still doubted, but others greeted Kalira with nods, even small smiles. The academy was slow to change, but it was changing. And in their dorm, something had shifted forever. Ethan no longer saw Kalira as just his alien roommate. She was his ally, his friend, his family in this strange place. And Kalira no longer saw herself as a ghost among strangers. She was part of something bigger, something worth protecting. Her body had not been what Ethan expected. Her powers were not what the Academy expected. But together they had found something none of them had predicted, not fear, not division but trust, and that was what truly mattered.